Hey guys, what's up? Stock Retail coming back to you. Another eventful Monday, and I got a few updates for you. So I had some time to carve out and go through our AMC updates. Going to talk a little bit about some things we saw from Roaring Kitty today and yesterday. Some big news there too, and actually some really great news lately for AMC. Just kind of tracking along. So I wanted to kind of talk that through. I'm sure most are aware Inside Out 2 coming out here very, very soon. So that's pretty exciting. So that's just kind of the nod to that on all the feels about fundamentals. Um, First off, if you didn't catch, Inside Out 2 is now the highest Pixar ticket pre seller since Toy Story 4. So since before the pandemic. And we've had a few Pixar movies since then, for sure. A couple of them did fairly well, like Elemental. Um, Even Lightyear was, a couple hundred million globally. So for this to be the highest ticket pre-sales yet for Pixar in pretty much like 5 years, I think there's a lot of excitement about this movie. I've got a good feeling about it. Have a pretty good forecast in there myself, but many of you know I tend to be conservative with my forecasts to make sure we can hit the numbers. I'd love to see this one beat numbers, and so far with pre-sales at effectively a half a decade high, that's tracking well. And I've seen a lot of posts on Twitter so far, starting to have some critics be able to talk about it, and I'm seeing nothing but really, really exciting news for that. By the way, kind of a fun thought. If you see how they're all squeezed in there, just fun to think about how squeezed in Shorty is right now. So that's kind of a nice nod on that picture too. If you didn't catch, also Bad Boys beat expectations this weekend, so that's great. And then you can see this is just a Twitter account I like to track. He does a good job tracking movie numbers. I'm not pumping him by any means, just telling you why I have him in here. Uh, the actuals for Bad Boys 3-day opening weekend came in, even higher. So we got 56.5 million domestic. It's already globally past its whole budget. So I think the movie cost around 100 million to make or something. I'd have to go back and look, but globally, the box office has already beaten the entire budget for the film. So that's starting well. And you can see number five biggest debut of 2024 and the biggest for R-rated films since Oppenheimer last year. So great start to Bad Boys. And a little feather in my cap. I've told you for a very long time, as we started to get to June, things were going to look a lot better, and here we are, and that's happening. You've got these pre-sales tracking very high for a June movie. You've got a June movie that outdid expectations on its opening. By the way, that A- score, if you ever track the cinema scores for an R-rated film, that is very, very high. That spells good news in terms of the legs for this movie. And so far, I've seen a lot of you saying that. One thing, as I'm seeing a lot on Twitter and a lot in my DMs of people asking, boy, how are we tracking to last year? Now, if you go to my last video, about a little over 32 minutes in, I kind of talked about that in just one slide with a few bullets. I'm going to talk about that a little more today. And the thing is, comparing to last year it's a mistake. We're in a strike impact still, and I've told you that for a very long time, and I'm going to kind of get to why that matters. But so I want to show you just to remind you what was going on this same time last year. You had the Super Mario Brothers movie basically break the world. I mean, this is just the domestic box office you're looking at in this quarter alone. In the same quarter, had done 500 million just in the U.S. and Canada. And you had Guardians was huge, Little Mermaid was huge, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, Fast X. All of these at the domestic box office were all in Q2 last year and were huge. So it was known all the way back last October, and that's why I started telling you guys. And there's some videos in my fundamentals playlist here on YouTube that you could find where I was saying, I think one of the videos is like November, and I was saying what the strike impact was. I was even showing you which movies had moved out. A lot of movies that were in Q4 last year, Q1, and Q2 this year all bumped out. Now, the good news, just to jump already to the good news, is many of those bumped out to like Q3 and Q4 that we're about to be in. Q3 starts in July. So we're about to see just a radical flip of how things are going. And I've been telling you that for like 8 or 9 months now. And so I really want to just hammer home today nothing that's going on is a surprise. It's all matching everything I told you. You can go find the receipts for proof of that. And what I'm setting up is then people who are freaking out about this and telling you it's terrible and all that, these are not honest people. They either have not been paying attention and they don't know what they're talking about, so that's someone you don't need to listen to, or they do know what they're talking about, but they're steering you wrong, and sort of saying the sky is falling. And that's someone you don't need to pay attention to. That's why I always tell you, you got to have both credibility, getting things right, and integrity, choosing to say things right. And so I just want to remind you, Q2 last year was really, really big, and we're still in a strike impact. But what's good is I'm going to show you here in the next few slides how we are coming out of that strike impact, how things are getting better exactly when I said they would get better. And that should give us confidence. If it's playing out the way we thought it would, that should give us confidence. So here's a view of just this quarter. These are the Q2 weekends. And if you look at just Friday to Sunday box office results, which is going to include Thursday previews, by the way. So when a new movie comes out, like Bad Boys this last weekend, it kind of opens up Thursday night. You include those numbers in Friday. You kind of roll them into Friday as the real opening. So these are just the weekends for Q2. You can see we've had 10 weekends so far in Q2. And looking at the domestic box office, so you can see we had some pretty big strike impacts. We had a kind of a lull here where we weren't getting new movies. And then you can see we had a dip here in week 9 as well. We didn't get some new movies there for a minute. Garfield and If and Furiosa kind of had to carry the day without getting new movies coming in. But what I want you to focus in on is this trend line. This is a polynomial trend line. It's kind of showing you we're curving up. If you did a linear trend line too, same, you just draw a line like if you're charting, you would just see this is up and to the right. And now, what do you have coming? Well, I just mentioned that Inside Out 2 has Pixar's highest pre-sales in 5 years. And that's coming out this weekend. So if you go back to this chart, this trend line is going to start curving up and almost like going a bit parabolic. There are some estimates. Actually, I'm not going to say estimates so we don't end up with more people trying to FUD you and say it was a disappointment or something. But let's just say Inside Out is going to be fairly big. And I think you're going to see next weekend being even bigger than some of these weekends you're seeing here. So this trend line continues up. And what have I been saying for so long? As we get to June, things start really ramping up and we start really cooking. Well, that's what you're now seeing. If this last weekend, look at this, was the highest of the quarter, and now I'm saying next weekend maybe even bigger, and we continue on. And so you're going to have Bad Boys still kind of running on its legs. The If movie has great legs. Family movies often do. Garfield has had great legs. I think we can be honest and say Furiosa didn't go as well as many of us had hoped. And I think in hindsight, perhaps we should have known if it's a prequel and it didn't have some of the main characters from some of the other movies. But, by all accounts, I think that one's going to be, I'll call it kind of a rewatchable someday because it was a great movie. It just didn't do well at the box office. And that's okay to acknowledge. But what I'm saying is the overall quarter is still tracking. I think we're landing at like 96% plus of my original forecast. So we're not doing, so bad that people should be freaking out. And remember, I said in the last video, we had Billie Eilish on top of that. We had the AMC Billie Eilish listening event, which kind of covers over some revenue gaps as well. That brought revenue back in. And then in the rest of June, besides, how well Inside Out 2 is shaping up, you've got Quiet Place Day 1 kind of coming in. I think that's going to be a real great movie. I just happen to love that franchise. And so I think it was Quiet Place 2. I remember it was still kind of COVID-y. Like my friends and I here in Oregon, we had to wear masks. It was just the rule in the state, in the theater. And I remember watching that one in theater, and that is the most jump scares I've ever had in a movie. It was a lot of fun. John Krasinski's done a really great job with that franchise. It's just one I like a lot. It's horror without, I don't kind of lean into sort of what I'll call like, I don't know, really hardcore horror, but this is more like thriller, maybe I should call it. And so I really like these movies. I think that's going to do really well. And there's other titles which I'm not even listing here. So just the point is, what people ought to be talking about is, wow, look, Bad Boys was great. We've been improving pretty steadily. May was better than April, and June is now better than May. And this is what I told you would happen. We're kind of past the worst of the strike. And Inside Out 2 is selling great. And the reason I'm kind of just really banging on this point is some of you would know what I'm talking about. We saw on Twitter today some larger accounts really spreading FUD, spreading really negative sentiment. And frankly, they're people who I have said before, I went on record with some of them and said that they were not with you, that they are not really apes. A lot of people pushed back on me, were pretty upset with me, and I just sat back and let it play out. And now you're seeing, they kind of are who we said they were. And so I just want to really highlight the facts so you can start measuring what people say. I'm holding up one hand against the actual facts. I'm holding up the other hand. And if those don't line up, you start to know who to not listen to. Speaking of Inside Out 2 and how well it's going to do, if you didn't know, the Pixar president, so, kind of under the Disney umbrella, said that Inside Out 2 is going to screen for at least 100 days, guys. And look at some of these comparisons, more than doubling the 47-day window of Lightyear. And look at Lightyear did 226 million, surpassing the 89-day wait for Elemental, which did almost 500 million. I think that's globally, not domestic. You can tell that Pixar really believes in Inside Out 2. And they had said this before those pre-sales. So this will be in theaters 100 days. So it's also then going to add a lot to our Q3 revenue, right? It's going to carry over a lot really well in Q3 and help that. I'm going to talk about Q3 a little bit here in a minute. And so just think through how well things are going and what we ought to be talking about versus what you're seeing from some people today. And I just want you to start to really notice that stuff. Speaking of Q3, let me show you 13 weeks of releases. And this is not even close to the complete list of movies in Q3. But what you're going to hear from me, I'll even kind of jump to the bottom line. And I've said this on other videos, and this is also what I've said since like last October. Q3 is now going to be the best quarter you've ever seen since pre-COVID. If it was fun last year in Q2 and Q3 when we had some profitable quarters, imagine I'm telling you this is going to be far beyond that and far better than that. And you're about to have that. And also remember, I've told you many times that people are going to focus you on the rearview mirror of that strike impact, right? Because we're going to report Q2. Let me go back a couple slides here. Basically, if this is kind of the weekends in Q2, all these results that were going on, we're going to report those, I don't know, like in August probably. People are going to get you real focused backwards, but some of that includes April, right? So these April dips that we had are going to get reported clear into August, and people are going to get you trying to be negative when cash flows are real time. And so think about that as in the movies I'm about to show you. If here we are in June, and I just told you how great, Inside Out 2 is going to be, how Quiet Place Day 1's coming out, how Bad Boys is going to be on its legs and still bringing in cash. If is still bringing in cash, and Garfield and Furiosa still has a little bit left, even though it's not been real high, and there's other releases. So if cash flows are real time, we've got money coming into the tills right now. So people are getting you focused on what happened in April, but that's old news. That's already said and done. In terms of cash flows, that's done. I want you to start separating mentally the timing of reporting earnings. And I've told you even in some videos how earnings is not the same as cash flows. And so the timing of earnings and talking with a rear view mirror and the timing of cash flows, which happen day in, day out. And so now think about cash flows as I start to show you this. All right, so Q3, we're going to start right off in early July. So on the heels of Inside Out 2 and Quiet Place Day 1, and Bad Boys is probably still on its legs, like I said, and boom, we're going to bring in Despicable Me 4. And now start to imagine what's going to happen. You can envision those full parking lots and the lines for the concession stands and the merch being sold. It starts to generate its own momentum. And so the strike killed a ton of our momentum. You guys know all about algorithms. Whether here on YouTube I see it, sometimes I get busy and I don't make a video for a while. And if I make a new video, it might be as good as any video I've ever made and I get less views because the algorithm rewards consistency. It's the same on Twitter. And that's why you get some people just clickbait left and right, posting all day, every day, because they know the algorithm has to keep being fed. Because think about it, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, whatever you want to be on, even Reddit, it feeds on content. It needs newness. And so what's happened in the movie industry, I think almost in life, we've been trained by algorithms. When something keeps going, it sort of generates its own momentum. And we had that last year at this time. And we lost it from the strike. That's okay to acknowledge. But that doesn't mean this was some disaster. It was all forecast. We saw it all coming. But what's great is now in June, and this is why I said it would get so much better, we're starting to see that consistency. You're starting to see things build on each other. And then we roll right into Despicable Me 4. And you guys remember how big that was the last time we had a Despicable Me. And all the young gentlemen who dressed up in suits, the little minion armies or whatever. Don't know if we'll, if lightning will strike twice, if we'll see that again. But either way, it's a beloved franchise. We know it's going to do well. Then you've got Fly Me to the Moon, which is an Apple movie, by the way, that they are putting in. I believe it's Apple. I hope it wasn't Amazon, but I believe it's an Apple movie. They're putting that in theaters. So more evidence of the thesis that even streamers are putting movies in theaters. We've got Twisters coming. That looks like a nice big summer blockbuster. Speaking of blockbusters, we've got Deadpool and Wolverine. You know that's going to be, who knows, maybe even the biggest movie of the year. I'm not sure yet. I have to go back and look. There's some real doozies in Q4, some real big movies coming in. So that'll be interesting too. Who can be the biggest this year? You've got Harold and the Purple Crayon. I just told you family movies have great legs and do pretty well. You've got Borderlands. We've seen time and again that video game related movies tend to outperform. I've got some hopes with that one, and I think some people might be sleeping on their forecast with that. All of this is through the summer. Look at how many there are. Alien Romulus. If you're not excited for a new Alien movie, I don't even know what to do with you. So I'm excited about that. I think that's going to be awesome. You've got The Crow. This was one of those, many of these actually were those strike impacted movies that pushed out. Many of these we should have seen already and would have helped our results, and we'd be rolling already. So it stunk. We lost some momentum. Adam had to bring in some cash, and I think he was very wise for doing that. You know that I've supported him in that. But here we are, at least finally, to the good part, and we should start celebrating, and people are not going to want you to celebrate. That's why you're being presented with a lot of negative information, too. We've got Kraven the Hunter, all of these rolling through the summer. Beetlejuice. We've got the Transformers movie. We've got this movie called Wild Robot, which I'm actually, frankly, pretty excited about. And we've got Wolves, which is, come on, Brad Pitt and George Clooney. There's not a whole lot bigger than that. So these are just a selection of what I could fit on the screen for you that are rolling out now. So if you kind of go back and you say, all right, we just did Bad Boys, then we're doing Inside Out 2, then we're doing Quiet Place 1, then roll through all of these here that I'm showing you, these 13 on screen. Just week in, week out, you're going to be seeing new movie. And like I said, with Quiet Place being out there for 100 days. So also movies that are staying out there and running their legs and continuing to bring in more revenue. It's not just going to be about opening weekends anymore. It's going to be about everything that's out there and people having to come back to the theaters 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 times to see the movies they love. So we are in a much, much better place, guys. We've gotten there. And what Adam did, I've told you before, he stacked the war chest, or stocked it up, so that we could get through the strike impact, and now we're good. Survive then thrive. What did he say in the annual meeting, right? He said, he declared, there's no plans to sell more shares right now. He reserves the right, the board reserves the right. If stuff happens, they've got to respond. I understand that and respect that. But he made it clear they don't need to sell more shares. I had said so with my analysis as well, and believe that we're to the good part, guys. So start turning your eyes forward. Don't let other people throw you backwards. So, if there's people on Twitter saying it's like the worst fundamentals in decades, I will just completely head-on challenge that and show you, frankly, how ridiculous it is that anyone would try to look you in the face and say that. So let's compare pre-COVID or pre-2020 to now on some very important items. I'm going to show you. So you remember, I've said I've got spreadsheets, up the wazoo. Sometimes I've even shown you guys where I've got every single line item in the income statement, every single line item in the balance sheet, and a few other items that I have all the way back to 2018. So if that's, we're getting almost to like kind of 5 years of results, and then, I have a forward view. So we're talking about like 20 quarters of every single line item that I have in these spreadsheets. And you've also seen, if you've been around, that I'm forecasting well enough that I'm beating Wall Street's forecasts. I don't see anyone out there so far who's been as accurate as me. I don't think it's too braggy to say if you've got the results to back it up. You just say, hey, I've been hitting the shot. So my point is, are you going to listen to someone who's beating Wall Street with their forecasts, or someone else who's just loud and toxic? And I continue to invite you guys to look at character, because I think it matters, and that helps you know who's going to probably flip on you. So let's look at this. Rent. You probably know if you followed me, but I know I have a lot of new followers. Rent is actually far lower now than it was pre-COVID. And you've started to hear Adam say in earnings calls and in the annual report, we don't need the box office to return to pre-COVID levels for AMC to have even better profits. You can find, we're getting close to 2 years ago, one of my first ever YouTube videos. The audio is terrible because it's one of the first videos, and I hadn't I was just, a rookie at making YouTube videos. I was getting on because I couldn't say some things so long in like Reddit or Twitter. If you're new to discovering me, I've been here the whole ride. I've been here since January 2021. Actually, I owned a little bit of AMC even in December of 2020. Um, I've just been Twitter and Reddit. I hadn't been YouTube as long, but around I think September of 22, started making some YouTube videos, and so you can see all the way back in fall of 2022, I was saying AMC doesn't need the box office to get back to pre-COVID levels because you can see if you know how to read business reports, you can see in AMC's fundamentals, in the profit and loss statements, the income statements, and in the balance sheet, you can see that Adam and team have turned this company, have leaned it out, have worked on the expenses, have worked on adding revenue lines to the point that it is going to be actually better than pre-COVID. So I'm going to continue to show you that. So first off was rent. You remember that we divested of a bunch of properties that were low performing properties. Well, now you're not paying rent on those anymore. And so our rent, and also there were some renegotiated leases. Our rent is now lower than it was back then. So that is one of their biggest expenses. That's another thing I explained in some of my earliest videos, that AMC has a heavy fixed cost model. What that means is when revenues return at all, or let's say there's inflation, your revenues are going to go up faster than your costs. That is a highly profitable business model to have. When your revenues go up faster than your costs, that is what every financial expert would like to have. So rent is lower now, which means it's better. Food and beverage per person. I've shown you the graphs in various videos and tweets and whatever, so I'm not going to do all that now, but food and beverage per person is way, way, way higher than pre-COVID. Sometime maybe in a forecast I'll kind of go through that again, but it's not just a little bit higher. It's like a whole new industry now. People are spending way more than they used to spend on food and beverage. And if you've been around, you know that I also track our costs on that. And so some people have tried to sort of FUD on that and say, well, yeah, but that's just inflation and the input costs have gone up too, so we're not making more money. Well, that's not true either. The spending has gone up faster than the costs. And so we're making more money on food and beverage per person. Same thing on admissions per person, which is kind of proving this point I was just saying a minute ago about fixed costs versus variable costs. Our revenue is going up faster than our costs. So that's also better than pre-COVID. Debt. You might not know, although people have started to share this a lot more, so many of you probably do know. Our debt is lower now than it was pre-COVID. So that is, again, don't just think of the debt itself, think of the debt payments. If you're making interest payments quarter in and quarter out, when you have less debt, you have less interest. That is improving your quarterly earnings. I update that every time Adam says, okay, we've paid more debt down and they file it. I go update my forecast because I can already count on lowered interest payments. I can just lock it in. And so then that improves our earnings. And it's better now than pre-COVID. Depreciation and amortization. Now, I want to just caution that's a non-cash expense, but it is lower than pre-COVID, and that drains our earnings. And that's why I said to you too earlier, remember, cash flows and earnings not the same, but in terms of earnings, this is better now than pre-COVID. Film costs as a percent of admissions. So you probably know, like when we sell tickets to a movie, we got to give some of that money back to the people who made the movie. I mean, that's kind of obvious. Well, did you know that as a percent of our admissions, we're actually paying less now than pre-COVID? We're keeping a higher percent of profits. So that's margin enhancement. That is fantastic in your business model. We did not have any interest in a gold and silver mine before COVID. We did not have thousands of doors of we had 0 doors of retail popcorn sales before. Now we have Walmart and Publix and Kroger, and out here on the West Coast, something called Fred Meyer, which is really just part of Kroger. We have Amazon. It's thousands upon thousands of doors. And I mean, depending on how you want to count Amazon's points of distribution, it's almost, it's direct to door, right? To retail. So that's millions of doors if you want to call it that way. We know that is a multi-billion-dollar market. Figure out some percentage of market share you think AMC could get. Adam even said that may be a 9-digit business within a few years. That's still a ways away. I have a conservative forecast I keep for popcorn. I haven't made it all that big yet until he starts reporting it. But it's not 0. And we did not have that pre-COVID. So whatever it is, it's better now. And then concert distribution. We did not have that pre-COVID. And he knows that he's got some coming in the back half of the year. He has signaled that to us. And in future years, he said the phone is rung off the hook. I don't think it would be, it would not make sense to say we're not going to get more of those, right? So every single one of these items, whether you want to talk about costs, revenues, or even whole new business lines, is better now than before. So for anyone to look you in the eyes and say, oh, things are terrible, again, I would just say that's someone who doesn't know what they're talking about, or does know what they're talking about and doesn't want to say the truth. And that either way, that's someone, boom, insta block for me. I'm not listening to you. All right. So what have I said? I told you last fall that we were going to have these strike impacts and we needed to get to June. I told you this spring that they're going to focus you on the rearview mirror, even though May was getting better, June was actually going to be good, and July through the end of the year is looking great. And by the way, forget me and forget anybody else in arguing over who to listen to. Listen to Adam. He's told you back half of the year was going to be good, right? So just listen to the boss. He has not steered us wrong once yet. So far, the things that I told you last fall and this spring have been accurate, both in terms of the numbers and in terms of behavior of some people. Everything has played out exactly as I forecast. So when you call a shot and the thing happens, that makes you really confident. And so, if it goes as you say it will, that breeds confidence. And that's where I'm sitting right now. I'm feeling pretty confident. You know who else is confident? Look at this update. So Roaring Kitty posted an update today. You probably saw that. That's all over the interwebs. Hasn't touched him. Now, I still think he's going to exercise quite a few of those. When he exercises these calls, or if, I guess I can't promise that's happening. If he exercises these calls, they will be, that's like 100 shares per call. So I told you that's 12 million shares. And so he'll exercise those at the strike price of $20. So each of those calls getting exercised is $2,000. So, you can just look at the cash. He doesn't actually have enough cash to exercise all of them, but who knows? Maybe he has other accounts or some plan. Maybe he's going to flip some of his shares to exercise these. I don't know. Only he knows, so I'm not even going to speculate on that. But I will say it's my belief he's going to exercise some of those. I think that's, I don't know. I suppose that's also speculation, but it's my belief he's going to exercise some of these, and you can see he hasn't touched them. So he certainly hasn't sold them. You can sell a call at a profit. You can see he was still green today. He could have sold these and pocketed this $14 million of profit. Has not done that. So that's pretty interesting to me. Yeah, I had another note and it kind of escaped my mind just now, but that's fine. I know I wanted to say one thing on this last slide. Now I remember. People are asking me also for Q2. How's our cash burn? And so I just want to bring back and remind you, I said Q2 would look a lot like Q1. Adam said Q2 would look a lot like Q1. So that kind of clues you in roughly on where we'll be. And what I would just say as a very high level note, remember that we sold some shares. We brought in a lot of cash. We paid down some debt, so our interest payments are lower as well. So I would just look at it roughly, super rough here. This is not a deep dive, but just super roughly as we brought in the cash to offset our cash burn. We'll either be just a little bit up or a little bit down on our net cash position. Now we ended the last quarter with $600 million plus in cash, in like non-lockdown cash. Because you get some reserves and you get kind of your free cash. Well, anyway, so we ended up with more than $600 million of cash last quarter. So I'm just saying we'll be somewhere in that zone again this quarter. I'd have to go dig and give you a number if I was to really do that. But just there's some cash burn, but we brought in cash, and so there's just no concern. And then, like I said, if you go back to the movie releases, we're going to be bringing in cash now. So if I show you all of that's been going on, if I say, hang on, let's do this without animation. So if I say, all right, June has been improving, and May was even better, and now June's better than that. If you've got like kind of starting to set recent records on pre-sales, you're having 100-day windows, and you've got this kind of release set, and these are just a few of the larger movies for the summer. And then every single item in the actual core of the business model is better now than it used to be. If you heard all that, and then you heard, okay, this guy, he keeps forecasting stuff, often more than a year before it happens. Some of those early videos I told you about in the fall of 2022, I told you that profits were coming last year, Q2 and Q3. And then what did we get? We got profits last year, Q2 and Q3. I called those more than a year out. I have a ton of receipts on that. So if all of these things are happening, you're seeing the business results, you're seeing the movies coming, you're hearing from a guy who at least has a history of getting things right. It doesn't always mean I'll keep getting it right, but I do have a track record of that. Would your response to everything I just said, would it make sense to you then if large accounts today were spreading negativity and fear? I want you to just think about that and then ask, okay, well, then why, if I am seeing actually everything is really, really positive, and a normal investor without all this noise and chaos might look at that and say, huh, this might be an undervalued stock. I want to get in before this thing starts going up. I kind of just started to answer for you a little bit why they're spreading all this negativity right now. And let's be real, it's a little bit squeezy, and I'm sure they're just trying to manage sentiment and fight this thing off. Side note, I have said on Twitter, I haven't said as much here on YouTube, anyone, and I mean anyone connected to Bill Pulte or Mark Cohodes, in my opinion, anyone remotely connected to them is immediately, I will not go near them. They're like radioactive to me. Anything that's come out of those two people has been just a disaster for retail, in my opinion. And I do not, let me think about what I want to say here. I have a lot of suspicions about a lot of behavior, let's say, from those two and anyone connected to those two. You do not need to agree with me. You can drop me all kinds of nasty comments. I'm not going to change my mind on this, especially after the 3.5 year journey that I've been on and the things I've dealt with. So I'm just telling you another breadcrumb of why people might be saying some things they're saying and why they're doing it right now. But I want to remind you, right? FUD, we just throw that term around, but it's fear, uncertainty, and doubt. That's what is being spread into you today. So I just ask you to really think about numbers, data, your DD, your conviction, and let facts be over FUD. I say that on Twitter all the time. Facts over FUD. Okay, so I'm just calling you back to facts. You don't even need to agree with me on what I've said, but I mean, I'm showing you sourceable information. I mean, even that all that stuff I said about the financials, you can go sort. I'm taking that out of their filings with the SEC. It's public information what I'm telling you. You can absolutely fact check me if you've been around a while. You know, on this channel, I used to say a lot more. I still say it sometimes. There's no trust me bros here. You can go fact check all of that. So if you can fact check the fact that we are better now in every way, shape, and form, then you know right away someone spreading fear or doubt about that. Either they haven't done their homework or they just want to spread fear and doubt. All right, enough on that for now. I'll move on. I noticed something today, just kind of on my phone. This is not technical analysis. This is just like, I don't know, eyeball charting, let's call it. I just spotted this. So you can see here's a 3-month view on AMC and a 1-year view on GameStop. And I just kind of noticed, especially that 20-day moving average. You notice how like we'll kind of go near it and then pop, and then we just went near it again today. And you could see we sort of dipped below it a little bit today on AMC. And even this morning, I was real busy. I had a bunch of phone calls for work. And I just kind of side glanced at it one time during a meeting, and I was like, I bet we'll end up above the 20-day. And sure enough, like, I don't know, what was it like? Well, here, I can see. So the low was 456. And in my head, I literally thought, so see that 20-day is 465, or call it 466. I literally thought in my head during the meeting, I bet we're going to finish above that. And boom, we did. So, that is not technical analysis. You can hear how kind of almost random and just gut level that was, but it played out, and you can see it down here too. Sometimes Bitcoin does that too. I'd watch that on Bitcoin. So I don't know, not trying to teach technical analysis. I'm far more of a fundamental and thesis investor than any kind of TA guy, but I just am saying, hey, that's interesting. Watch the EMAs. You can see GameStop finished pretty near, and I think when I started this video was a little bit green in the after hours, so probably back somewhere around that 20-day. Uh, yeah, probably pretty close. So I'm just kind of watching those, and I don't know. Do your own TA, do your own DD, but maybe that can mean we're at some kind of bottom. But I can't call that. I haven't done any technical analysis on that. So just an interesting observation. Another observation. So I know people keep talking about glitches. I've got thousands of screenshots of glitches of AMC in particular because I've been an AMC ape over the years. Today was GameStop, and so I just wanted to talk about this. There are, in my mind, a few reasons you'll see this. Um, One is just some kind of weird fraud and manipulation. Like we've seen some really wild things from I just can speak more to AMC than GameStop because of my journey, but I'm sure all of you in GameStop have seen this plenty of times too. And I know I've seen posts from you, going back over the years. So sometimes there's just wild stuff. I want to acknowledge that. And I want to just share there are some logical reasons this happens. And so I just want to share those with you. So as you watch these, you can kind of know those and think through those. One is dark pool prints. So, that a lot of us have said we don't like this off exchange trading. And by the way, separate in your mind, off exchange doesn't equate to dark pool. There's off exchanges more than just dark pools. There's alternative exchanges and a whole lot of stuff. Well, anyway, when people buy in the dark pools, eventually it kind of goes through what I'll call the tape with an exchange. And so when it shows up, let's say someone bought Friday and it's just showing up today, or they bought this morning on a dark pool when the price was higher, or something like that. You remember Friday briefly, GameStop was far higher actually. And I think it was maybe Friday, it was either Thursday or Friday, we saw some of these glitches clear up in the 60s. So there were people who, I think it means on the dark pool, there were some trades that executed in the 60s or today here in the 30s. And so you can sometimes know that it's an actual purchase that happened and it's getting printed on the tape. The other thing I think it could be, now this is more speculation, is parked orders. Now you're not supposed to do that, right? But that is something we believe happens to us. Sometimes they'll park buys and pass sells through the tape, stuff like that. And we believe that's part of price manipulation. So if a parked order was kind of coming through and they're releasing it after hours to try to sort of manage what's going on, that could be, and so that's pure speculation there. The other thing I would say is, if you're sort of related to parked orders, but if you're passing FTDs through the tape and maybe these are getting passed through, it's kind of more almost like those parked orders. So there's a few reasons that this will happen. It's something we'll all keep track of for sure. I don't think by any means that I'm trying to say it should happen or that this looks normal to me. I'm not saying that. I'm just letting you know through the years some things I believe that I've seen. Speaking of seeing, you can't see it. So if you watch the live stream the other day, you know what I'm talking about. And by the way, I apologize to everyone. I had tweeted and someone else tweeted first, and I didn't do a good job fact checking. I did trust a bro, and I reposted another beer that was also a green beer, but I do not think it was the right one now. I think this is the one. And you can see even today, Treehouse Brewing Company, which was kind of cool. I have a treehouse I built my kids, so that was kind of a fun coincidence there. But anyway, Treehouse Brewing Company has this beer, green beer. And so kind of cool. They tweeted today. Go check that out if you want. I don't know if they maybe were on other platforms too. And they actually printed at the bottom of some cans, I think Roaring Kitty to the Moon or something like that. So, I mean, it's marketing on their part, but it's cool. It's fun. And if you like beer, that's definitely fun. Like, what's a drinking strategy, right? So, but I want to speculate for just a minute here. So, it was green and you can't see it. And then look at a post that I shared. I've said quite a few times on the recent videos, I've said it on Twitter. I would encourage you to be tracking the volumes of GameStop and AMC. And I've just shared that AMC's volume historically spiked even more than GameStop's recently, but both have spiked pretty radically. And so I sort of track more through the lens of AMC, but I know this is true in GameStop as well, or something like this is absolutely true. This was Friday I posted, and in 19 trading days, the entire AMC float had been traded about 10 times over. We're talking 3 billion shares, billion with a B, in 19 trading days. So in effectively, let's call it a little less than 4 weeks, to trade the entire float 10 times over. And I can tell you, for me, now I'm tiny. I'm a retail investor with you guys. I was bigger in 2021, but hodl culture has been changed some of our portfolios, but that's okay because I know we're going to win. Um, anyway, so here I am. I'm tiny, but I have not sold a single share in that time. I have only been buying. And I kind of worded this poll badly after I posted. I was like, oh, shoot, I should have worded this differently. But you guys get the idea. Like, have you been buying? Have you just been holding? Or actually, have you sold any? And this is not scientific. It's not even close to being scientific. It's a Twitter poll. Most of the people who follow me would be pro AMC. So I know it's not scientific, but it's just interesting that almost 800 people replied and only about 2% said they sold any. One person even told me they clicked that by accident. So here's the point. How is the float trading 10 times in 19 days without a whole lot of people selling? Where are these shares coming from? That's the type of thing I just encourage you to dig at. And what I would say is there's got to be a lot of FTDs. And that would kind of mean at some point it's like this, I don't know, pig in a python is a saying, or it's like water behind the dam. It has to be let out at some point. So that would be a lot of buying pressure, wouldn't it? And that would be green that you can't see because it's getting held back and hidden. So I don't know. I'm speculating there. He always has like 5 levels of decodes. And so what can happen is more than one thing can be true at once. He can be saying three, four, 5 things. And if you find one, you might be right, but you might also miss a lot of other things he's saying. So let me just say all that carefully. But either way, it's my point of view now. I'll just speak for myself that there is no way in heck that all that volume recently from GameStop and AMC has really been accounted for. And then I suppose what I also ought to acknowledge, if you look at the short interest as a percent of each day's trades, it's been bonkers. Like I know the other day GameStop was like 76% short interest that day by volume. Now shorts can also be day traders, so that doesn't mean all of those would show up in the short interest. Uh, but you know that some of them are. That's not all day trades. So AMC and GameStop, significant amount of shorts have been getting added. AMC had been going parabolic. I see that GameStop now is even more, I think, than 2021. So we know there's just a bum load of shorts at a time when GameStop has piled up cash. AMC, I just told you all about how we're about to turn the most profitable we've been yet. That is not the right time for shorts to be piling on, especially while like AMC is pretty much at all-time lows. An all-time low for us as long investors is actually an all-time high for shorts. They're shorting at the worst possible moment for them, in my opinion. All right, so some final personal reflections, and then we'll wrap up. Just a thought on why I call people out now and then. A couple times. I've only done it a few times. In the fall of 2021, I did it very vocally. That was Cohodes and Tara and that whole crew. I ended up having to go out on Marine, who that one was sad. Like at one point in 2021, I considered him a friend. And I had to then be vocal about him. So, if people are challenging my investment, you're now taking food off my table. And worse than that, I have this like deep sense of justice. And so if you're misleading people, I've told you guys, I have a business background. I have several business degrees. I've got the training to see through a lot of this, but I know not everybody does. And that makes me really, really, I'd call it almost like a righteous anger. Like I get pretty angry when people lie to you. I do not like that. And from time to time, I am willing to just, I don't know, take some heat and call it out. And then the other thing that's happened for me, I'd love to tell all these stories someday. I'm kind of just waiting till we win. There's just a lot of stuff I've been through and a lot of stuff I've seen that I don't necessarily think everyone has seen. And I apologize if that sounds, I don't know, egotistical or something, but some people see more than others. Some people have line of sight. And so I'm humble even with some friends I have that I say, oh, you see some things I don't. You know some things I don't. That's okay to acknowledge. And so there are times when I see some stuff and know some stuff and have sources who tell me some stuff or whatever. And I know that there's people I believe are, let's say, paid puppets who get scripts delivered to them. And some of them intentionally try to bring me down. That has happened as well. And so you're going to see me sometimes speak up and call people out. And, today in this video, at least, I'm not naming names, but there are plenty of you who will know exactly who I'm talking about because you saw it play out on Twitter today. And that's someone who I said many months ago, I said they're not with us. And some of you were pretty mad at me for that. And I hope that now you're seeing, this guy tends to be right. And I know how that sounds. I know the ego that you must feel sometimes behind that. But I have not, let's say, by name called anybody out that I've been wrong on yet in 3.5 years. And so, I weigh that carefully before I do that because I also know it's not going to be fun for me. I get dragged when I do that. So that's just a thought of basically, I don't mind holding up a shield and fighting some people off. And I think that's what we ought to do. I mean, if you see people who are either time and again being wrong without being willing to admit it, then you got to kind of correct them. Or if you see people intentionally being wrong and they're trying to lead people astray, there's a saying I like, sometimes shepherds shoot wolves. Like it's not always mean to, in the name of protecting everybody, call someone out. That's my point of view. Enough on that. I did have a video in March. That's the screenshot at the right here. So if you go find that video, if you're interested, where I talked about a lot of the manipulation tactics. And there's actually research on this that I shared about how people step in. And you guys know the stories. It's happened on Reddit. It's happened on Facebook. It's happened on YouTube. It's happened on Twitter. They've placed agents among us to try to sway sentiment, cause confusion, fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and chaos, and drama, and negativity, and all that stuff. Right? So you just need to level up and learn how to see it. So that's a whole video that I did on that. And there is a video, I have an FTD playlist if you want to learn about our FTDs and how that kind of works and how to count them right, because sometimes people count those wrong too. There's a video about stock manipulation and how to move people out of a stock as well. So just want to get you guys informed, and that's my main heart on that. And just fighting for, I mean, I named myself Retail Stock because when I came to this movement, I saw this idea of us in retail standing up for each other and, beating the system, beating the machine that's been fighting us corruptly with what I'd call unjust weights and measures. And so I believe there ought to be just weights and measures. There shouldn't be cheating. There shouldn't be fraud and manipulation. And if I have to be loud and stand up against that, and sometimes I get a couple knocks against me, that's fine. I'm going to do that. So those of you who want to, I don't know, tell me to stop or tell me to be quiet, I think it's been 3.5 years. That's probably your answer on whether you're going to get me to be quiet. One other note, by the way, just a really random note. I guess it's not random. I've gotten asked a few times on this, and I meant to answer it in the last video about voting, and then I realized I didn't quite answer it directly enough. I talked a little bit about routine versus non-routine votes, but I didn't hit the specific point of why that matters. So there are broker non-votes. So like when you don't vote your shares, sometimes your broker can still send in a vote for you. And if it's a non-routine item that we're voting on, then your broker cannot vote for you. So that's why you saw some of the items in the vote for the annual meeting for AMC have very low voting rates because your broker couldn't automatically send in these non-votes because it was a non-routine item. So some of you didn't get any votes sent in, even though you might have otherwise expected it on those non-routine items. That's why the vote was so low on those. And that's why I encourage all of you to really, really vote if you can. Okay, lastly, this was just a cool image a friend of mine had posted. I thought it was pretty cool. They were kind of talking about just some neat concepts there. So I'm not even going to really explain it. I just think it's a cool image. So that's enough on that. I got the animation backwards. You guys can ignore the bottom. Don't look behind the curtain. Anybody who follows me already knew that was coming anyway. But all right, so a little bit of cryptic messages, and then I'll get my final closing. And just guys, we're good. We're good. We're gonna win. So 77 times an alien. Do you believe in coincidences? Look out, future, because here we come. We will win. Let's go.